Maybe it's the fact that it's Mother's Day, but I had kids on my mind while I was preparing this sermon. I was thinking about kids, and part of that is that on Thursday at noon, I was over at the convention center at a luncheon for teen empowerment. And I don't know if you know the Center for Teen Empowerment over on Genesee Street, but it's an amazing place, all about gathering up kids from our city and giving them a place to be safe and a place to express their gifts. They're really all about potential. And all these kids, when you listen to them talking, that's how they talk. They've been formed in this environment, you know, that says, we've got this amazing potential and we're trying to find it in each other and we're trying to express it and we're trying to have these opportunities. A cool thing about, another thing, I like teen empowerment's about 2 blocks from my house, and it's just such a beacon of light, and it makes me so happy. And it was founded in Somerville, which is where I was born, in Massachusetts. So it's got 2 sites, one about 2 blocks from where I was born and one from 2 blocks where I live now. And it just gives me so much hope in the world to be around the teen empowerment folks. And you know what this is like, right? We need safe space, right? Safe space to kind of figure out who we are, to test out things we haven't tried before, maybe be awkward for a while we take some chances on our voice, on our way of being in the world. And we need a community that surrounds us and understands that holding one another through that kind of process, loving one another into greater fullness of being, into healing our wounds and manifesting the gifts we've been given is essential, right? I think that's something we kind of understand here at Emmanuel as a great value in life. And it's thrilling to me to see that we have a spot, at least one spot, and hopefully more if we support them and they can expand, more spots in the city that focus just on our teens in the city and try to give them a kind of an Emmanuel-esque space of love where they can grow and be the people they're made to be. A creative space, a space where they can talk about life, right? Don't we need to talk about life and to talk about the hard things that we see in the world, the hard things that happen to us, the hard things that we observe in the world around us? A safe space. Through the lunch, there were different teens that talked about their experiences, and there were 3 teens sitting at our table, actually, so we got to talk to them about the whole experience. And one of the things, one of the teens named Kadeen was one of the speakers, and he talked about how he lives like kind of over at Jefferson and Columbia area in the Southwest, and he just talked about the experience of living in that neighborhood. He talked about how he didn't know anything except that people were, in gangs and in drugs, and people were going to jail, and this was his understanding of reality and how it worked. And so he lived in that reality, and he had a gun himself, and he was arrested, and he was jailed, and he did drugs, and this is a kid who's like 19 years old, and he's already had all those experiences. And one day he was out on the streets, and he saw this flyer hanging up on a post, and it said there were youth organizer jobs available at Teen Empowerment. And something he just described, he said, I don't know, normally there's stuff all around, I don't always pay attention, but something just lit up for me about that sign that said, try it, step out a little further, do something you never thought of before. And he went, and what he discovered, Teen Empowerment had 5 youth organizer jobs funded and available. 300 youth showed up for those jobs. 300 teenagers. Isn't that unbelievable? I mean, sometimes we think like our kids don't want an opportunity, or they don't want to figure out how to get out of the mess that they're in. They want it so bad that 300 showed up on their door. Teen Empowerment didn't know what to do, right? But what they did do, which is phenomenal, is they really worked to keep every last one of them engaged as much as they possibly could. They could only pay 5 of them, but they said, we're going to create programs, we're going to do stuff for as many kids as we can possibly do here. Kadeen was lucky, he got one of those jobs, and all these possibilities opened up for him. He started viewing himself in an entirely different way. He started to see himself as a person who was capable. And he said, wow, all the things I'm doing to get into trouble, I could take all that same energy and I could do it to create a real life for myself, to create a real future for myself. He couldn't see it before, right? He saw that he could be a light in his community. That's one of the things he said. One of the huge things that touched me is in seeing that, he didn't say, well, let me get mine and get out of here. I now see a doorway out of my trouble. Let me move on. He said, I want to give my gifts back into my neighborhood. I want to open up this possibility because I realize I know this neighborhood and I can help this neighborhood. This is my home. At the kids at our table, James was one of the young men, and he just expressed this exuberant sweetness about him, just laughter, joy, innocence, in the way he conveyed himself. And yet, as he talked, we realized, he lives in a really tough place. And one of the people at our table asked James, they said, when you have these events at Teen Empowerment and all these kids come, are you scared? Are you scared someone's going to have a gun? Are you scared there's going to be violence? And this kid who, has to live through everything, you can imagine, bursts into laughter, just joyful laughter. And he's like, no. He said, first of all, we're known for being safe space. So people come in a different mindset when they walk through the door. They come realizing that they can kind of let their guard down, realizing they're going to have a chance to talk. And then he said, the same thing we churches have figured out. We always have food. He said, if you have food, people get in a good mood. They come and show up. And he was talking about how when he's out on the streets where he lives now, people know that he's a youth organizer for Teen Empowerment. And he says, you would think they might bully him or something, but he said it's exactly the opposite. He said everywhere he goes, all of these guys that are, stuck in the gangs or stuck in drugs or stuck on the streets in some way, they shake his hand and they thank him for doing the work he's doing, and they tell him that he's inspiring to them, that they would like the same opportunity sometime. And so this is what these kids are doing. I sat next to a young woman, Tynesha, and what struck me about her is it felt to me like she was in the space between being totally shut down and defended and starting to speak. She could almost not make eye contact. And yet, when she started to roll and started to talk about teen empowerment, all of a sudden, her face opens up, her body language opened up, this completely expressive, articulate, beautiful young woman, right there, shifts right before your eyes. But there are still all those hints of this closed down, defended place that she came out of. This is the work that Teen Empowerment does. And I liked the language that she used when she was sharing it with me. She said, the only way I can describe what I'm experiencing here is I feel like I'm waking up. I feel like I was asleep. I feel like I was dead. And I feel like I'm waking up. Isn't that powerful? What a blessing to get to witness that. For me, this is a powerful reminder of what changes the world, right? Sometimes we think punishment will change the world, or jailing these kids will change the world, or cordoning whole neighborhoods off. And all these thoughts we have about, how to make our city safe, or zero tolerance, or curfews and lockdowns and all this stuff. We have all these thoughts in our head that are coercive or repressive about how to heal our city or change our city. And then I go sit inside this room and I see it's exactly the opposite. It's this opening up, this safe space, it's nurturing community that leads to real, enduring transformation. Coming awake, joining our hearts to others in safe space, caring for our communities. Isn't this what mothering and fathering our creation to potential are all about? Isn't this what we're called to? For me, this is what it means to be Easter people, right? We are, Emmanuel, right? We're Easter people. We're people who believe in the God of life. I think this is what Jesus is talking about and dealing with, essentially, on this road to Emmaus with Cleopas, right, and the other unnamed disciple. The two of them are kind of walking in a daze. They can't figure out what they've just been through, what has just happened. They've been traumatized. Their expectations have been shattered. And essentially, what we read through the whole post-resurrection experience is a heck of a lot of confusion. The Greek words actually bring it out better. Like when the women find the tomb empty, the word is like puzzled, perplexed, didn't know what to think, right? When they saw the two men in dazzling robes in Luke 24:5, they were awestruck and terrified. When the apostles heard the reports from the women in 24:11, they didn't believe a word of it. They thought they were making it all up. It seemed like an idle tale. These words appeared to them as nonsense. Right? These are the implications of the Greek words that we're using to describe this. Peter's reaction to seeing the empty tomb in 24:12, wondered, amazed, marveled, puzzled, shaking his head, right? In 24:37, when Jesus appears to them, they're terribly frightened. They're thinking they're seeing a ghost in a state of alarm and fright, scared half to death. Even after Jesus shows them the wounds. Tom talked about this last week, right? They still couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. They were still wondering. They were amazed. They were glad. There was this, the words imply a mixture of glad, amazement, and wondering. Joy and doubt sort of all meshed together. So we wonder, in part, what are they confused about, right? What's at the core or the essence of this confusion? And I think Luke is just trying to help us with this by putting them on the road to Emmaus. Now you need to know a little background about Emmaus, because anybody in the first century would have heard a lot of things when they heard Emmaus. They would have thought about 1 Maccabees, and they would have thought about a story was told about a local king, maybe historical story, that went in and crushed Roman soldiers at Emmaus, and it was a big victorious thing, and this local king was a hero, but the end result, they're urging, essentially in the story, Judas Maccabeus is speaking to the soldiers, the rebel soldiers that are fighting they're occupied people, and they're fighting the Roman soldiers, and he urges them to cry to heaven that God will crush the enemies in Emmaus, the Roman enemies in Emmaus. It says, then all the Gentiles will know that there is one who saves and liberates Israel. So this is a major story in the consciousness of the first century, that God will come and rescue us from occupation, and Emmaus is a site where this occurred, where they fought back against the oppressor, right? On the top of this, about 20 years before Jesus was born, there was another famous guerrilla attack, perhaps inspired by this story, on Roman soldiers at Emmaus. And the result of that was that Roman legions burned Emmaus down in retaliation for that. So this is all circling around this discussion of Emmaus. And why are they walking to Emmaus in the post-resurrection, right? In some ways, they're traveling along confused, and they're trying to see the meaning in everything that occurred on this, but they're kind of like, you could almost say they're on the road to retaliation, right? Emmaus, in a sense, represents retaliation, a retaliatory form of liberation. So you could, if I were reading it in the first century, I would hear, they're on the road to Emmaus. They're on the road to this retaliatory way of getting liberated, or viewing God as retaliating for them to liberate them. And in the middle of the journey, they get this break, and Jesus comes into the picture, a visitation, and he kind of helps them. He helps them in their confusion. First, he asks them some kind of questions to cajole them and to start thinking, and he teaches them about the scriptures, and he helps them make meaning, life-giving, liberating meaning out of everything that they've just witnessed. He nurtures them and feeds them. He mothers them and cares for them, right? He helps them until all of a sudden this confusion, this layer, this veil starts to part and they can see. They recognize him. And right at that moment, he kind of disappears and he pushes them out of the nest, basically. Good, you got it. Keep going. Right? Do your thing. Figure it out. Learn it. And he says, didn't we feel on fire? Didn't we feel our hearts burning within us? It's like our hearts know truth, right? Our heads are trying to figure all this out. We're getting confused, but our hearts know that there's truth here. Yesterday, Becca and I were talking, and she gave me this beautiful image, and I thank you for it, which was the idea of going through a tunnel, right? And sometimes we're going through a tunnel and like the light is way, way, way down there, or maybe out of sight. And she said, but sometimes there's holes in the tunnel and little sparks of light are coming through, right? Little reminders to keep us going, keep on keeping on. There's the big light, eventually the fullness of light. But along the way, we get little bits of help. Christ light comes to us. This is, I think, what Jesus is doing with these disciples on this road, saying, you got a long journey, it's a hard journey, it's hurt a lot, but let me remind you who I am. Let's bring a little light into this. Remind us why we're doing this. Why are we doing this struggle? I want to, seeing this light and following that light is, I think, what makes us Easter people, right? That's why we're Easter people. I want to say a word in this context. I can't really leave a pulpit this morning without talking about the events of the week, right? And we know that our nation assassinated Osama bin Laden. And this has been a source of just deep sadness for me. And I know the sadness isn't so much that we've kind of contained in a fairly significant way somebody that's caused a lot of pain. I fully get why that's a relief for a lot of people. But the sadness was seeing young people cheering about death. I mean, it just crushed my heart to watch that. It felt so lost. It felt so confused. It felt like that road to retaliation, that road to Emmaus, that brutal feeling that violence will somehow liberate us or rescue us from what holds us down. Of course, we need ways to contain people that are damaging to society. But we have those ways. There's things like arrests. There's things like due process. Even better, I feel like a civilized society would at least arrest and have a due process. An enlightened society would do restorative justice, right? And seek healing for everybody. But I felt like we had one of those test moments of what kind of society we are, and sadly, I think we failed it. But that's okay. The tunnel is long and the struggle is long, but Jesus doesn't give up on us. Jesus keeps coming on in and saying, let me show you the way to life. Let me show you the way to light. So we're not alone. We're not abandoned in this moment. We're not abandoned in all of our failures that happen in so many ways. This light is going to keep pressing into the world. And to have that happen and then go see these teens on Thursday was like, there's the Christ light pressing back into the world, pressing against that. On one hand, young people cheering about death. On the other hand, young people cheering about life and the life that they're finding. Sometimes we have to make a choice about that. We have to decide what we're cheering for here. Yesterday, downstairs, Area Artists Club celebrating 60 years. Can you believe it? 60 years of gathering safe community for people to heal from addictions and enter recovery. And so I went downstairs, and one of my friends down there stood up. The second he saw me and went running and stood up and enthusiastically silenced, a couple hundred people who were down in Vic Hall, and said, I want to introduce you to our pastor, And so I congratulated them and thanked them for their good work. And the second I was done, people came rushing toward me saying, I want to thank your community for giving us safe space. Person after person after person. I mean, I couldn't leave. And everyone said the same thing. You have no idea. So many churches reject us. So many churches don't appreciate the healing work we're doing. And I want to thank you, thank your community for giving us this safe space. And one after the other said, it's changing my life. I'm finding new life. You don't know where I've been. Now I'm going on a positive path. And it's coming here. It's feeling safe here. That's allowing me to do that. So this is what we're doing, right? Mothering creation into its potential. Mothering ourselves. Let's start with ourselves. Loving and mothering ourselves into our potential. Loving the people we encounter into their potential. Making safe places, good containers where our awkward growth processes can happen, right? And where we can just be with each other as we do that. This is what we do. We're Easter people.